All right, today we're diving into something pretty wild. It's a book called Symphony Baranka, which translates to a numbered symphony. And let me tell you, the idea it puts forward is, well, it's a big one.
And it all starts with this one question. Could a sacred text, something ancient and revered, actually contain a hidden mathematical code? You know, something that lies just beneath the surface? It's a mind-bending thought, right? A mix of faith, math, and mystery. And the author of this book? They think they found an answer.
Okay, so what exactly is this symphony in numbers? Let's break down the core theory, the very foundation this entire book is built on.
So, Symphony Baranka, a numbered symphony, isn't just a clever title. The book's whole argument, its big hypothesis, is that the Quran has this hidden, super complex mathematical structure woven right into it. And the author isn't just, interpreting verses in a new way. They're treating the entire text like a massive data set, something to be crunched and analyzed with modern tools.
All right, so if there's a code, there's gotta be a key, right? Some repeating element that unlocks the whole thing. And according to this theory, the key to the Quran's entire mathematical structure, it all comes down to one single specific number. And that number is 19. Just 19. A prime number seems simple enough, right? But the book argues that this one number is the fundamental building block, the bedrock of this entire textual symphony.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, why 19? Where did they get that from? Well, it wasn't just pulled out of thin air. The whole theory is anchored to a specific verse in the Quran itself, from chapter 74, verse 30, which says, "Over it are 19. This single line, this is what kicked off the entire investigation.
So if 19 is the key, where are the locks? Where do these patterns actually show up? Well, the book lays out the evidence piece by piece, starting with some really simple counts and then building up to some seriously complex stuff. Let's dig in and see how they make their case.
The very first piece of evidence the book points to is something called the basmala. If you're familiar with the Quran, you'll know this. It's the opening invocation, the phrase that begins almost every single chapter. It's probably one of the most recognized phrases in the entire Islamic world.
And here's the claim, and it's super simple, but kind of powerful. In its original Arabic script, that foundational phrase is made up of, you guessed it, exactly 19 letters. The book presents this as Exhibit A, the most direct, straightforward link to that key number, 19.
Okay, but it can't just be one phrase, right? Well, the theory goes way beyond just counting letters. The book starts analyzing word frequencies across the entire Quran, and they find stuff like this. The Arabic word for human, which is bashar, apparently appears exactly 19 times. Not 18, not 20, 19. A perfect one-to-one match.
And this is where things start to get, well, a lot more complex and, honestly, pretty wild. The book dives into something called the muqatat. These are mysterious individual letters or a combination of letters that appear at the very beginning of 29 chapters. For centuries, nobody's been quite sure what they mean. But the author's claim isn't about meaning. It's pure math. They say if you take one of those chapters and count only the specific letters that introduce it, the grand total is always a multiple of 19, every single time.
So this all leads to the big question, right? I mean, is this just a series of really interesting, maybe even spooky coincidences, or does it actually point to something more? To try and answer that, the author shifts gears from just counting things to some heavy-duty statistical analysis.
Because here's the heart of the matter. How can you possibly tell the difference between a pattern that happens by pure random chance and one that's actually, meant to be there? Is it a random fluke or an intentional design? That is the central question the book tackles head-on.
To make their case, the author uses a statistical tool called a p-value. Now, don't worry, we're not going to get too into the weeds here. But basically, a p-value just tells you the probability that what you're seeing is a random fluke. Think of it this way. A really, really low p-value means it's super unlikely the pattern you found happened by accident.
And this right here, this is the book's big statistical punch. What the author did was analyze a bunch of different sacred texts. They looked at the King James Bible, the Veda, the Tripitaka, and they asked a simple question. In each book, what percentage of unique words appear a number of times that's a multiple of 19? And as you can see from the chart, the result they found for the Quran was, well, it was way, way higher than for the others.
But look, a claim this huge is obviously going to get a lot of scrutiny. So, for our final section, let's put this all into perspective. We'll look at the book's ultimate conclusion, the main criticisms leveled against it, and what the author actually says they were trying to do with this whole project.
On one hand, the book basically concludes that these patterns are so statistically unlikely that they have to be evidence of a deliberate non-human design, a kind of divine signature. But on the other hand, you have the main counterargument, which is a classic in data science, the cherry-picking fallacy. Critics say, look, if you have a massive text and you look hard enough for patterns based on any number, you're bound to find something that looks amazing, even if it's totally random.
But what I think is really important here is what the author themselves says about all this. Their stated goal isn't to prove anything or replace faith with math. It's more about building a bridge between modern data analysis, STEM, and the traditional study of these texts. It's about using new tools like Python to find new layers of appreciation. And they're very clear. These findings are meant to be a basis for wonder, not a pillar of faith.
And that really brings us to the end. The book Symphony Barranca lays out a pretty incredible case. So what is it? A hidden divine code? A massive statistical coincidence? Or maybe just an invitation to look at something ancient in a completely new way? Well, that's the question we're left with, isn't it?